Hi, everyone. This is Jessica Pettitt. And who do I have the pleasure of interviewing today? And how did you get into D&I work?
So this is Tony Chatman. I'm a professional speaker and a corporate relationship expert. And the D&I thing. So I actually avoided doing D&I work for years, even as a professional speaker. The reason being, I go way, way, way back. When I got out of high school, I got a scholarship to go to college, and I entered into a program in which I was the first, no, that's not true. I entered into a program where I was the second Black person to ever go through that program in its history. And this is a very large university, but it was a very niche program. And so really since my sophomore year in college, I've been the only Black person in the room, both in school and professionally. And it got draining. It became an issue I didn't want to keep dealing with. And then when I became a professional speaker, of course, because I'm Black, everybody wanted me to be a D&I speaker. And I just was like, I don't want to be pigeonholed into that. Mm-hmm. But about 4 years ago, I just was looking at the world and saying, I can't sit back and do nothing. I'm looking at, problems of race, problems of gender, problems of nationality, problems of ability, disability, problems of orientation. And in my mind, they're all different facets of the same problem. Mm-hmm. And yet I didn't feel like people were addressing it that way. They were advocates for one little silo of it, but not really trying to put them all together and saying, this is the holistic problem. And so because of that, I decided I wanted to jump into this arena, but I wanted to do it really from a perspective that matches my background, which is very data study metric oriented.
Absolutely. Well, I'm super honored to have you, and full disclosure, I would consider you a new friend, and I'm really looking forward to getting to know you more in the coming years, not just professionally, but on a personal level, because I really believe in your approach to not just the work, but like how you've met new people and watching you with people. Like, you're just a really great person. So I was so excited when you said, yeah, sure, I'll be on your silly little show.
Absolutely.
So we're going to start off with 2 concept questions. These are 2 concepts that keep rolling around in my mind. There's no wrong answer. I'm just curious how the concepts land on you.
Okay.
So the first one is the concept diversity dividend. So I typically hear this when people are talking about the bottom line of doing diversity work. But when I say diversity dividend to you, in thinking about like investment, action, and return, how does that land on you?
So it lands on me 2 different ways. Number one, there clearly is a business case for diversity, right? We know that organizations that have, organizations that are in the top 50 places for minorities to work outperform the S&P 500 over a 3 and 5 year period. Same thing for organizations with a diverse executive board in terms of gender. We know that, SHRM talks about it. It increases innovation, creativity, all of these other things. I think that you can't deny that there's a bottom line effect for diversity. On the other hand, I almost feel like there's something wrong if I even have to answer that question. That if we get to the point where you can look at something that is obviously good and morally right and still have to justify it financially, then we've got a totally different issue that we need to address.
Yeah. It's really fascinating is that I recently was on a call with a lead, and I was with a couple of other professional speakers, and they asked if they could listen to me do kind of like the recon initial first date call. And I was like, sure. So I had them on speakerphone, which may or may not be ethically correct because the lead did not know that they were on speakerphone. So full disclosure, I did it. So they're on speakerphone and they're asking me like what kind of work I do. So I give them kind of my spiel, and they were like, yeah, but like, how does that result in profits? So I said, well, da, 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 da. And they were like, yeah, but like, what's the dotted line? What's the bottom line? And so I just said, you know what? I think this is probably not going to fit. Like, like, I am happy to send you to some other people, extend my referral network, give you some readings. You call me when you're ready to work. Hung up the phone. And the other speakers were like, dude, you just lost the lead. And I'm like, I didn't lose a lead.
No.
I lost a headache, but I didn't lose a lead. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm with you 100% on that. And, you know, it's just one of those things where, so I was doing well before I started dealing with D&I, and I really do primarily unconscious bias. This was not a business decision for me. This was a passion project.
Yep.
And so, you know, I'm reminded of when I first got in the business, I was looking at doing coaching, right? Which I don't really do. And I'm so glad I don't. It's another story. But so I ended up having a conversation with Marshall Goldsmith, who's one of the top coaches in the world, right? And he says to me, look, here's the number one thing you need to remember. If you go to a client and they want to know, you know, how do you fix everybody else but them, run as far away as you can, because you're going to kill your brand and your reputation, and it's not worth the headache. Yeah. And what you just said to me fits within that exact same category. And I just know I'm not a fit for everybody, and I'm fine with that.
Well, what's interesting with your opening and with that piece, it's a nice segue to the next concept, and that is asterisks, other duties assigned. This is usually like the last line of a job description, right, but it also speaks to kind of the extra unchecked, unrewarded labor that we often have to do around our identities. Talk to me about that concept and how it lands on you, possibly a headache, possibly not.
Can you just clarify that a little bit for me? I want to make sure I'm answering the right question.
Sure. So it's open-ended, but okay, if the concept of asterisks, other duties is assigned, is something that you may feel as a person, as a teammate, it might even be actually listed in your job description. So as a supervisor, what does that mean? You can go anywhere you want to with it, but how does it land on you? Okay,
got it. I think in the workplace, it's really anything that you can do to help the team that's ethically correct. Mm-hmm. And so there's a lot of times, because, you know, a job description can only be so long, you know, so if you wrote everything that a person really needs to do, then you got a problem. I think that's also when that part in the job description is referred to, you've got a totally different issue. You have an engagement problem, right? Because that really means normally that's the response to somebody saying that ain't in my job description. Then they go back to, you know, other things as applied. I think personally now, from how I run my business, for example, I just said I don't coach, right? Unless I got a client that really wanted to change and I realized that coaching was going to be necessary to help reach the mutual goal that we've set. And so in those areas, for me, I'm more focused on the end game and the results. And so then I'm willing to say either I'll do it or I'll bring on someone onto my team who can do it. I'll provide that service. I will, you know, I normally speak and do training and workshops and that type of thing. But, you know, I find myself on all sorts of calls. A lot of times I have clients who say, hey, we're looking at starting a D&I program. Can you just get on a call and coach us through it? And a lot of times I'm doing that for free because they're clients I've had for a long time. So to me, that, you know, other things as, you know, I can't think of the exact phrase, sorry. But to me, that phrase.
Other duties as assigned.
Thank you. Other duties as assigned, to me, is whatever it takes to meet the end game, as long as it is legal and ethical.
Mm-hmm. Cool. One of the pieces that came up that's kind of like the other side of it. So like, let's say that we all work in an office together and I'm the only woman. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it becomes my job to plan the birthday parties.
Right.
Right. But if celebrating the team members' birthdays is actually important and it's actually part of the culture, it doesn't have to default to the woman to do the party if it's actually important. If it's not actually important, then are you just making her or me do it? And then the even more flip of it is that something that Ben, who really likes to make cheesecakes, he likes to do it. So he wants to do it and he wants to make cheesecakes. Does he have the opportunity to do it?
Right.
And none of that is in your job description, usually. So, all right, great. So then.
Hey, can I say something about that?
Yeah.
That falls into the category of like office housework, I call it, right? Mm. It's who does the meals, who takes notes during a meeting,
Mm-hmm.
right? That almost always falls to the woman who's in the group, assuming there's only one woman, which is another story. But the idea that, you know, you just made a great point. We all have strengths and weaknesses, and sometimes we default to these things because that's been the status quo, whether stated or not stated. Often it takes someone to come in and just bring it up and
Right.
disrupt that pattern and say, hey, this is really important. We need to do this, but can we share the duties? Because, you know, yeah, Jess has been doing it every time, but it's not like this is the only thing she has to do with her job. We could share this duty.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the more that we're able, now the thing is, in my mind, the beauty of it is I stepped in for you. You didn't have to do it yourself.
Right.
Sometimes when we have to do it ourselves, then we're looked at as the bad person. But when other people come and defend each other and disrupt it in that way, it becomes very powerful.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's actually, I'm glad you said that, because it's such a great kind of moment in kind of how you pull all of your work and your approach together and what you do that made me get all Twitter-pated about you in the first place. So let me see if I can Ghostbusters this and like cross the 3 streams.
Okay.
So my understanding of Tony Chatman is that you are a fantastic speaker, and I've seen you speak, and you have great energy, and you're really able to like pull together a room no matter what the content is, I imagine. Mm-hmm. Number 2 stream is you have an engineering background. What? Most people don't see that coming.
Right.
But from an engineering background also is a deep connection and respect to research. So then if you cross those 2 streams, what I love about being able to have a conversation with you, and ironically, the best conversation I've had with you was on a boat of all places, right?
Right.
So 2 streams cross, and then there's this active listening that is super present and that's able to articulate, like, this is what a problem is. This is the best way to solve that problem. And if you need to, here's the avalanche of data and evidence, but you're able to convey that. Can you talk a little bit about the work that you do, how you do it, how that combines with personality types, and what do you love to do about your work?
Sure. So number 1, that was awesome. I need to record that and make it my ringtone, because that was absolutely, wish that was my introduction, actually. That was beautiful. I really appreciate it.
Go for it.
For me, so the engineering thing is fascinating, because once you're an engineer, it just changes how you think. So once an engineer, always an engineer. I look at everything from a data perspective. That's how it is. So what do I love to do? Number 1, I love to deal with how people work together. It's become a passion of mine. And so it involves unconscious bias. And when I started looking at unconscious bias, I didn't even look at it initially just from a diversity standpoint. I just looked at it in terms of how does the brain make unconscious decisions that leads to unintended results. Mm-hmm. So times that we think we're being objective and we're not. And so there's tons of science, tons of data that's with that. And I love devouring that, right? It's awesome. But then I realize if I'm standing in front of a group of people, they haven't read everything that I've read. And so to take that and bring it down into something that's very digestible and doing it in a way that is less about it being confrontational and more about it being something that people can internalize that leads to further discussion is the art that I really wanted to pursue. Mm-hmm. So that is kind of how it works for me. Also, the other thing, you mentioned personality types. So I've been working with personality types since 1997. And it's just one of those things that when it hit me, I was like, oh my goodness. And it was very different than how a lot of people from what my conversations internalize it. And I just thought, oh my gosh, I've got to really look at this. And it was fascinating because I was working with a faith-based nonprofit at the time. And so I had a lot of people coming to me with personal issues, life issues, marital issues. And I realized that this was a great component to help them see past themselves. So I've had times to get certified in some very esoteric forms of personality stuff, But I really believe that it's just one of those things that when you understand it, it changes the lens of which you look at people, because then you no longer look at everybody based on you being the benchmark, but you allow them to fully be themselves and accept them for who they are, which is really a large part of what diversity and inclusion should be about in the first place.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So those two things are huge for me. And then there's a motivational component that I just love. I love personal development. You know, my first 4 or 5 professional speaking opportunities were opening for Les Brown. And it was just like one of the greatest things in the world, right? And that's probably who I'm most often compared to. Not that I try to steal his style, but there are just some similarities because I'm very passionate about this craft. It's not something that I take lightly, because I realize that the minute I step on stage, the minute that a microphone's in my face, that I have the power to change how people think and maybe even how they live. And that's something I take very seriously. So that's kind of how it all pulls together for me.
Oh, wonderful. All right. 2 favorite questions of mine.
All right.
First one, what have you changed your mind about lately?
I have changed my mind. Boy, okay, this is going to be very personal. So this is going to be fascinating. I've changed my mind about inclusion. I was very siloed in my view of inclusion. So I grew up very, very religious. Okay. So for me, I totally got inclusion when it came to race. I totally got inclusion when it came to gender. I didn't get inclusion when it came to the LGBTQIA plus community. I didn't. I just, it was a big blind spot for me. And building great friendships with people who had very different experiences than I was just eye-opening. And especially growing up in the Midwest, where I did not have a lot of open friends who were in that area. So, I mean, it really, I went from not understanding to advocating, because I really feel like everyone should get a chance to be who they are at their core. And it's something I wish I'd understood 15 years ago, and I didn't, but I'm glad I do now.
It's fascinating is, as an LGBT person, first off, thank you. And the amount of work that I feel I am able to do now, primarily with conservative evangelical Christians who hold their faith in their core, that I'm able to advocate for that space as well. I haven't always been able to, but I have also gotten to a place where if we can't advocate for each other to be who we truly believe we are, what are we doing? Right?
Yeah.
That's wonderful. Look at that.
You said that. So that was the perfect way to say it. And I'm in full agreement with exactly what you just said.
Well, you can add that to your intro too.
There you go. I'm going to make sure I get a transcription of this whole interview.
Perfect. Done. Okay. Next favorite question is, what do you absolutely know?
That is a hard question.
It's my favorite question.
Because what do I absolutely know? I absolutely know that people are subjective. I absolutely know that there are things that I believe right now that I won't believe in 5 years. I absolutely know that I love my wife and my two sons. And I absolutely know that right now I am doing what I am meant to do right now.
That's so beautiful. All of that, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
May we all get that amount of clarity, even if it's just for a few minutes.
Yeah. Well, that's why I said right now at the end, because who knows in a week, right?
Right. All right, lightning round.
All right.
So I have some together that are a bunch of different questions, and they're easy, intermediate, or deep. So I'm going to ask you, you gave me 3 random numbers, so I'm going to ask you those. You answer them however you wish. Okay, first one, number 11. What is your favorite section of a bookstore in which to browse?
Autobiographies.
Excellent. Number 27, intermediate. Share a life goal that you've set for yourself.
There's a financial goal that I've set, but I actually have in writing that I want to live a life that I love and respect.
Mm. That's amazing because it's less and more measurable than a financial goal.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Number 51, deep. When was the time you most doubted yourself and what caused this doubt?
2008. 2008, I'd been in the speaking business for a year, but I just left my safety net. And then 4 weeks later, the recession hit. I lost all of my clients in a 4-week period. I couldn't pay my mortgage. I doubted everything about myself. I doubted not only my decision making, but the fact that I brought my family into this with me. I doubted myself as a man, as an adult. You know, I remember I actually had to give my kids an IOU for their birthday. I'll never forget that day. You know, I had one friend and one awesome wife who got me, and everybody else didn't. But, you know, I'll never forget how I felt, and I'll never forget who was with me during that time.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it. And I think that this whole conversation has been really good role modeling for complicated conversations, and being real people is the best tool we have to connect with one another. So if people wanted to connect with you, how should they get in touch with you?
You can go to my website. It is obviously www. Well, it's not. Tony Chatman. Now that's CHAT as in Tom, MAN. So TonyChatman.com. Facebook Tony Chatman. Twitter at Tony Chatman. Instagram is at Tony Chatman Speaks. Working on getting at Tony Chatman on that one. You can email me almost anything at Tony Chatman. It'll come to me, but ideally speaker at Tony Chatman.
Great.
And, you know, I'm easily findable, very responsive. I love talking to people, you know, whether it's about business, life, whatever, I'm here.
Awesome. Well, thank you for being my friend and for expanding the support for all of the work that we all do. So
Absolutely.
Thank you very much for coming.
Thanks so much for having me, Jess. This was a great conversation. Looking forward to more hang time together.